Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. We are brought to you by Fresh Roasted Coffee, and we're still in the midst of the summer cool down with a fresh cold brew, iced tea, or iced coffee from our friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Click the link in my show notes below and in the description as well. You'll see on the YouTube channel, you'll get 20% off your first purchase if you use the promo code BYP20. We're also brought to you by Acorn to Oak, A2Oak.com, your outsourced marketing department, and our very good friends over at Play It Again Sports for all your used sports equipment, new and used, and more. 1450 Clements Ridge Road in Deptford, New Jersey. Check them out online, playitagainsports.com/Deptford. And with that, we welcome in our good friend Lloyd Vance, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Sports Radio 1029 FM, The Game, part of the Coastal Sports Network. You catch him every Monday night, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. You also catch him during the drive with myself and also on BYP. So 1 week in the books, I guess you can say, in the preseason. We know a couple things. The unders have been hitting like a clockwork. I believe 10 or 11 games the unders hit. But I guess we'll start off with to sit or to start, my friend. And that's kind of the crux of where I want to go on this edition of BYP, and then we'll go around the league. But as always, first and foremost, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me back on.
Always a pleasure. So, all right, to sit or to start, right? We're seeing this in the NFL right now, and we're seeing it with teams like Baltimore and Kansas City, Philadelphia Eagles in our backyard. The starters are resting. I mean, it's tough. Now you see why the NFL has kind of condensed it into 3 preseason games. They elongated the season to 17 during the regular season. It's probably going to be 18 in another year or so. But I look at certain teams and I say to myself, man, I know it's an opportunity for younger players or veteran players or backups to make an impact, or maybe some starters that were jettisoned, i.e., the Trey Lances, the Justin Fields of the world, to make a statement to show, hey, we still belong in the NFL. But for a team like the Philadelphia Eagles, we already know their offense historically is a slow starter at times. It's been their bugaboo over the last several years. We also know that they routinely sit their starters. So I thought Sirianni was going to have Jalen Hurts, Saquon, A.J. Brown, Smith. I thought he was going to have them out for at least an offensive series or two against Baltimore. That wasn't the case. I don't know if we're going to see them against New England, and then you only have one preseason game left. So where are you where we start to get into the debate to sit or to start?
To me, I'm an old school guy. I like to have those guys out there getting their reps, but today it seems like a lot of the coaches want to give these veterans, and I use veterans kind of with quotes because a lot of these guys are maybe second, third year guys, but
Sure.
usually they're most valuable guys. They do not want them on the field and getting possibly hurt in these, uh, they say preseason, but they're exhibition games, Q. And with the roster being 90 men until the 53-man cut down, there's only one cut down now, and it's in late August. They can use all these guys that are basically camp bodies, undrafted free agents, guys that are trying to work their way up on special teams in these opportunities. So, you know, it just seems to be the modern NFL, and maybe you'll see some stars play a little bit here and there. But I know the Eagles, as you were saying, they're using this week, they're going to practice with the Patriots.
Yep.
And
Joint
these
practice.
combined practices, they're using as these live reps for these players. So, you know, to me, I feel bad mostly for the fans because they're paying full price for these games and they're getting, the guys that are third string, fourth string guys out there.
That's a good point with the joint practices beginning Tuesday, and New England's an early 2.5 point favorite in this week 2 matchup. You're right. I guess the question, or really the comment is, so then you would think certain teams, Detroit, Kansas City, the 49ers, I get it because that's a banged up team. Cleveland, they had 5 starters go down with injuries. So I understand all that. And then you have a situation in New York with the quarterbacks, both quarterbacks coming off big time injuries, season ending injuries, mind you, and Daniel Jones and Aaron Rodgers for the Giants and Jets, respectively. I don't know how much stock you put into a series or two in week 3 of a preseason game and how much of that can carry into week 1 of the regular season. But I know no matter what, when teams struggle, and I'm just not talking about the Eagles to start the season, people will look back and say, well, this is why you should play your starters more in the preseason.
Yeah, and you and I always talk after that week 1. We're like, man, that was some sloppy action out there,
Yep.
and that's what it lends to. These guys have not played, they're not playing full game speed, and they're just not used to it, particularly as you're saying, offensive side of the ball, they're having problems with their roots and maybe the linemen blocking in certain alignments. And then defensively, they've just not seen these type of coverages, and a
Right.
lot of times you're seeing missed assignments on their side. And let's not forget the big thing, always penalties. You're seeing way too many penalties the first couple weeks of the season. But this is where we're moving towards, as you were saying. They're going to be 18 games eventually. Right now, 17
Yep.
games, regular season games, and these first couple weeks are unfortunately their ramp up. But every game counts because we know early season losses they can factor into it. Look at last year, the AFC South was very bunched up there, and you saw the Texans win on the last week of the season.
Speaking of the Texans, they beat the Steelers 20-12 in the preseason opener for both teams, respectively, which leads me to Pittsburgh. Justin Fields, 5 of 6, 67 yards, and looked like he had maybe 1 or 2 carries. The kid Kyle Allen got more snaps, 17 of 23 for a buck 93. I think it's an interesting dynamic here because even though Mike Tomlin is going on record and says, look at the depth chart, Russell Wilson is quarterback #1 to start the season. I think when you're hurt and you're not available, all that does is give a player like a Justin Fields an opportunity to get more snaps and reps. And now, as much as I wanted to back my play, and I was pretty adamant saying he's going to be the week 1 starter, that might not be the case now, but I believe earlier rather than later, you're going to see Justin Fields under center for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Do agree with you that he is going to get his opportunities this upcoming season. And for now, Russell Wilson is a starter, 35 years of age, and that has that calf injury that's been kind of lingering. And Fields had some good moments in the game. I've been watching all these games, and the only thing was Q, he had a couple snaps that he fumbled with the backup center.
Center
I think
change.
eventually they're going to put the rookie from West Virginia in there. They drafted him high to come in here and be starting center. But other than that, I thought Fields looked confident in his throws. He had a couple nice throws to Pickens, and we'll just see how this team comes along. But the Steelers are going to be interesting because they start at Atlanta, and that's going to be a key game for them. And then they go back to Denver in the Russell Wilson
Yep.
Bowl, week 2. Chargers, then at Indianapolis, and then a big game against Dallas. So, some favorable matchups there early in the season. But I think eventually, we talked about Russell Wilson and his age. He's just not the same guy, and he needs his legs to make plays. And that's what Justin Fields can do. And he'll be able to give him an edge, make some plays with Najee Harris. And I think Arthur Smith's going to want to use a younger guy.
I agree 100% with that assessment. Russell Wilson's shot. He's going to take a lot of shots, no pun intended. He's going to take a lot of hits. He's going to be very tentative. The days of him rolling out to his right, scrambling to his left, improvising, those days are gone. He's not a drop back passer anymore. He's not in the pocket passer. He's a Hall of Fame quarterback, no doubt, but he's not that guy anymore. Now, speaking of quarterbacks that are trying to hang on, Trey Lance, substantial amount of reps on Sunday in a Cowboys 13-12 loss, which again hit the under against the Rams. The Rams rested their starters as well. The kid Stetson Benson, who sounds like Cologne. I mean, my goodness, he stunk up to join yesterday, 4 picks. But Trey Lance, 25 of 41, a buck 88, got sacked 3 times. Now you look on the surface and say reps, reps, reps. Here's my one issue, and they mentioned this during the NFL Network broadcast. I mean, it's funny because they showed you Tom Brady as if to give the impression Tom Brady was calling the game. He wasn't, but I think it was Andrew Siciliano, Wentworth, the old tackle or the lineman for Cincinnati, and then Mika Kimes. And I go back to, you and I have talked about this. I want to see what these players can do that maybe we thought they couldn't do, right? So you've got a situation with Trey Lance, 4th down. Well, we know the Cowboys can run the football. Let me see him throw it. So what happens? He throws it out of bounds, and the announcers turn around and say, well, why didn't they run it there? I need to see what this kid can do in the goal line situation if pressed upon action. That's one of the reasons I'm watching these preseason games. But did you get any type of assessment from Trey Lance on Sunday?
Well, it was good to see him out there, and you see he's an active player, as you're saying, a guy who can roll out, move around, a lot of things that Dak could do when he was younger and was not doing. And the thing is, though, they still view him as the third option at quarterback position. He's still behind Cooper Rush, he's behind Dak Prescott. And then you start to wonder, okay, they gave up a fourth round pick to get him. Dak is still not signed. Are they ready to hand the reins over to him next season? I just am not sure of that now. He makes some nice throws, but he's still very inconsistent in terms of his accuracy, as you were kind of alluding to there. So, you know, had some nice plays, but then you also have to say who's he playing against, and defenses are very vanilla at this type point in the season because some of these teams may see each other in the regular season.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, listen, I don't believe that Trey Lance is an NFL starting quarterback, but you have to see what you have as a backup, right? Because we know Dak Prescott's health history. Everyone's sitting there saying he's going to make 60, 70 million. I find that hard to believe. I don't believe he's that guy anymore. So there are reclamation projects in the NFL. Pickett back up to Jalen Hurts. We're seeing it in the NFL, these retreads over and over and over. So I understand why you're not going to see some of these star quarterbacks get as many reps as we would like. But we've also seen so many quarterbacks go down over the last several years that you blink and the backup has to step in right away out of necessity.
Last year, record number of backups played, and you know, they need him. You need a guy for a short term to come in there and help rally the team. Yes, obviously, not everybody's going to be a Nick Foles who is able to step in there and lead his team to postseason glory, but you just need that guy to hold down for a couple of games, and that's what a lot of these guys did for the majority of their career. Think of like a Jeff Garcia, who I covered, coming in for the Eagles, came in for an injured Don McNabb, able to rally the team, keep them moving. But that's not the type of guy you want in, week out. So, you got to have a capable backup Q. You can't just have that guy who has a baseball cap and he kind of, looks the part, the old Cliff Stout type of guy. You're going to have somebody that's able to come in there because as you're saying, with these quarterbacks doing, especially these read options and the speed of the defense, these
Correct.
quarterbacks are getting hit and getting hurt quite often.
And that's why a lot of them are going down like flies. We see it week in and week out, and it's also a tribute to the lack of offensive lines and the pass protection for some of these quarterbacks, and also some of these quarterbacks with the decision making as well. Monday edition of Back Your Play with Q. Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us, our NFL insider, host of Lloyd Vance's Insider Football and Sports Radio 1029 FM, The Game, part of the Coastal Sports Network. You can catch him 8 o'clock Monday nights live Eastern time, 8 to 9. Does a great job. And I know with the NFL season right around the corner, going to have some really good analysis and content and guests as well. And he's always kind enough to join us on BYP and, of course, The Drive with Q, which you can also catch Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. We are brought to you by our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Don't forget to check out the show notes for the promo code BYP20, 20% off your first purchase. And with the weather starting to heat up, right? I mean, we kind of got past the dog days of summer, right? So you mentioned the joint practices, a couple more preseason games, then boom, the NFL season starts. I mentioned the unders are kind of hitting at an alarming rate, and we always see the defenses ahead of the offenses. But then there are some games where you just throw out these guys who aren't even going to make the roster and they start to light it up. But that's not the case with some of these other teams when we start talking about offenses. Like, I don't think Kansas City needs their offense to get out there. Now, I don't know how much of the game you watched the other day. They got a scare with some injuries as well. I think Hartman went down with his one of the wide receivers went down. Hartman had the issue. That's what I wanted to ask you. Hartman had the issue with the kickoff
Hollywood.
rule. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When he downed it, and then
Oh, you're talking about the safety, yes.
yeah, I mean, and that it looked like it confused the hell out of everyone, right? So that's the one thing that I thought of and I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah, it's going to be confusing out there. And I think of these veteran special teams guys like Danny Smith, and he's special teams coordinator for the Steelers. And they were talking about, okay, he's got to acclimate his players and the formations and kind of understand his role because it is new to everybody. Because before, remember, they could down the ball, I think, within the 20 or so, and it was considered a touchback. Now, if it lands in that landing zone, they have to bring it out. So it's going to make it more exciting. And that's what I talk about. The Devin Hester type players were kind of taken out of the game before last year. I think it was like 70% of kickoffs were touchbacks. So now we're going to have some excitement in it, but it's going to be something to get used to. The alignment, the guys are so close together at the beginning of that kick, and then they can't move until it's touched. If he breaks containment, one of those returners back there can take it to the house. So I'm waiting to see that happen. But yeah, a lot of the players I think are confused, and they're going to have to work this out in their special teams meetings.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I was texting a couple of my buddies the other day, and I think I text my one friend. I said, as crazy as it sounds, and he was like, "You're not making sense." And I was like, "Well, that's typically the case with me." But I said, "What if now you see more teams go for 2 points because they don't want to give up the field position early and have the team come right back down for, say, like a field goal on the very next drive, depending upon situation of the game, where ultimately instead of starting at the 2025, you potentially start at the 40 and you're giving them a short field no matter what." That's just me throwing it out there. And he's like, "Well, you're not making sense, but maybe you are making sense, if that makes sense, right?"
Sure, it's going to factor into the style of play. Think of a Dan Campbell, aggressive coach. Yes, he may go for two in situations or kick it a certain way, depending on this new alignment. So it's going to be interesting to see how this factors into games, particularly late, as you were kind of alluding to, Q. It, late in games, you're going to have to make those adjustments because teams don't want to go to overtime. It seems nowadays they want to get the games over with. They're going to go for two. They're going to go for it on fourth down when they think they can close games out. And if this kick factors into it, yeah, they might do the same thing. And let's not forget, if they kick it out of bounds, I think it's going to be even worse now. I think they're going to get the ball like 40 or something. And the way these guys are making field goals, they're only going to need about 10, 15
That's it.
yards to try a kick.
Yeah, and if your team's like the Eagles or Detroit or the 49ers or Kansas City, you can, or Miami, you can get down the field in a blink of an eye. I was listening to a couple national talking heads talk about the quarterback position, which we focus on all the time, right? And they mentioned the Ayuk situation in San Francisco. I think when it's all said and done, he remains with the 49ers. But is he a bigger piece to that offensive puzzle than, say, a Christian McCaffrey and or a Debo Samuels? And if you take him away from that offense, how much do you think that will impede the progress and contribute to the struggles for Brock Purdy?
The interesting thing with Ayuk is they put him out there, Q, and I say for a reason. I think they think he's kind of a spare part type of guy in their offense because they have Kittle, they have McCaffrey, they have Samuel. You talk about they have Jennings who's come along, and they draft Pearsall coming out of the University of Florida. So they have so many pieces on that offense. They could kind of afford to let him go. Now the thing was, the market out there is just not what it used to be in terms of these receivers because yes, Richard Jefferson got the 4 year, $140 million contract, but not everybody's going to be worth that,
Right.
and it's going to be interesting to see how other teams operate. But the Steelers that they were talking to, Cleveland and New England, they just thought the price was just way too high. And yes, Ayuk probably will be with the Niners, and they'll let him play out his deal, and then they'll go from there. But he's a good option, but I just don't think he's a top level guy. Amon-Ra, St. Brown. We talk about Jefferson. You talk about Jamar Chase. I think those guys are above him right
Interesting. All right, the Raider quarterback position, or I guess you can say the battle right now. Apparently, you've got Aiden O'Connell, you got Gardner Minshew. They're kind of locked in this competition. Antonio Pierce, Raiders head coach, said that the goal is to announce a starter following the team's next exhibition game at home Sunday against the Dallas Cowboys. So obviously, if they get a equal fair share of snaps and they both perform well, then it makes the conversation or the decision that much more tougher for the head coach, which is actually a good thing, as opposed to, oh man, I can't rely on this guy, but I gotta fall back and rely on this guy. I I watched enough of Minshew over the years where he'll give you some flashes, but I also again mentioned in the past with this kid O'Connell that he's interception prone, right? He's got flashes. I mean, backed in a corner, who do you start?
now. Yeah, I think in the end they're going to go with Aiden O'Connell. I just think he has a bigger upside at this point in his career. Yes, Minshew can come in there and make plays, but they seem to rally around O'Connell at the end of last season. They had a mini run, were able to get, you know, Antonio Pierce the job there, and he's going to get his opportunity. So when I look at Minshew at this point in his career, I think he's one of those guys that's a backup. He's a spot guy. You bring him in, he'll have some flashes, but turnover is going to be a big thing, and I think the Raiders are going to kind of be down this year. They have Max Crosby and Wilkins on defense, but not much else. And the roster is kind of devoid. So try to get the role of Devontae Adams and just see how it works out from there.
Yeah. So, how much can we really learn about some of these quarterbacks, especially these young quarterbacks, these rookie quarterbacks? Because right now, the preseason is where you get your feet wet. So, you're looking at Daniels, you're looking at Nix, you're looking at McCarthy. And I mean, look, some of these guys, they had to settle in after throwing some bad interceptions and then settling down a little bit. Like, for instance, Minnesota. Ultimately, who do you believe is going to be the week one starter in Minnesota?
Now, this is another situation where I think it's going to be the veteran. I think they're going to go with Darnold for a little bit, but it's going to be hard to keep McCarthy on the bench. And we know in the NFL now, when they use those first round picks, it's not like when like Steve McNair came in, when like Manning came in, they had to sit and wait and kind of wait their turn. But they're paying these guys so much money, investing so much in them, and we know that picks can be quarterback picks at the high level can be coach killers. So they got to get that guy on the field, see what he can do, and maybe he'll be a building block, almost like what Brock Purdy was for the Niners. They weren't sure what they had with him, but they put him out on the field and went along. So I think Darnold will start for a little bit, but it's just not going to take long for McCarthy. And like I was saying with Devontae Adams' situation, they got to get the ball to Jefferson. He's their key guy. They got Addison there as well, and they have some weapons to work around.
All right, a couple of minutes left before we wrap it up on this edition of BYP on a Monday. Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us. Rich Quinones here. Lloyd hosts Lloyd Vance's Insider Football and Sports Radio, 1029 FM. The Game. Give him a follow on X at Lloyd Vance. You can catch him every Monday live at 8 p.m. I want to go back and circle to the NFC East for a moment because uh, I think, Washington has just quietly went about their business. And I'm hearing this two levels of extreme here with the Dallas Cowboys. Either they're going to be really good or they're going to be really bad. I've gone on record. I think I went back on record in March and April, and I told you the Giants are going to stink. By the time October rolls around, they'll be out of it. I'll have a mini helmet. That'll be it. And you know where I get when we're in October. You can't even friggin' get us to Halloween with my big blue, my football Giants. And that leaves Washington. And then you got the Philadelphia Eagles. I get the sneaky suspicion that Washington is going to sneak up on some teams. And I know when we do our predictions and whatnot, divisional winners and playoff winners and this, that, the other thing, you've kind of quietly been high on Washington.
They've seemed to turn a corner. They got rid of Daniel Snyder's owner. Uh, Rivera was that stoic head coach. They're moving on from him. They're bringing in Dan Quinn in here. Cliff Kingsbury is bumped up this offense, and there's some excitement here. And particularly, you're talking about Jaden Daniels coming there as a Heisman Trophy winner. I watched a lot of his preseason game, and he's an exciting young guy. He gets the ball out of his hand. Uh, he's going to make some plays out there, and people have been begging for Terry McLaurin for years to have a good quarterback. And now I think he's going to be able to get the ball to him, Jahan Dotson. And then that defense, we've always talked about all the first rounders on that, defensive line with Allen, Payne, and they're going
Yep.
to be able to build
Yep.
around. So it's going to be fun to see them. And I think they are a team that can kind of sneak up on some people. They're a 4-win team last year, so their schedule may be a little bit light. And I'm looking at them maybe to compete for that 7th spot in the NFC playoff race. And, just people are just going to sleep on them. So they're at Tampa Bay. They have the Giants at Cincinnati, at Arizona. So those first 4 games, there's some winnable spots there for them. And this is going to be an exciting young team.
There are a lot of win totals that are extremely low where teams I'm confident are going to hit that number. But then there are some teams that I think might surpass those win totals and actually hit the over. Washington might be one of those teams. All right, my friend, I always appreciate a couple moments. Don't forget, Lloyd Vance kind enough to join us on this edition of Back Your Play, powered by our good friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee, and of course, Acorn to Oak for all your outsourced marketing needs. Played Again Sports, 1450 Clemens Bridge Road. We will talk to Lloyd later in the week, and I'm sure he'll make an appearance on the drive. I know he's all over the place. He's working. He's got the kids. He's taking them back to school. He's just paying tuition bills, which I don't even know. Like, I start to see the sweat formulate when you were kind of telling me that in the beginning. I mean, I don't even want to, I can't even fathom that, man. Do you have to remind them, hey, I brought you in this world. I can take you right back out.
it's a big investment, but hopefully it's worth it. I know people have seen Nate on my shows, and he's enjoying being in
Yeah.
school, and he
Yeah.
wants to talk football. That's what he wants to do. He's,
Hey,
he's communications major. We're going to
there you
see if he
go.
can make it happen.
Hey, that's it. Listen, you have to start. You get that foot in the door early, and look, he's got a good rabbi in his father right there. So, which by the way, you can catch Lloyd every Monday night, 8 to 9, with Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game on X, and of course on Coastal Sports Network. Always appreciate a couple moments, pal. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.